Thank you for coming along today to our latest No Limits webinar, where we're going to be hearing in a bit from some of our alumni and colleagues and partners around the scaling journey and the experience of that. Really excited to hear from them and hear how they approached it and what they learned and what they would do differently, and a whole host of other interesting bits. Small bit of housekeeping just off the top. We have got access to the chat and the Q&A function today. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask to the panel, we've got a bit of time at the end of the session today for some Q&A. So by all means, please do pop your questions into the Q&A function. It should be on the bar at the bottom. It might be under the more three dots bit, but it should be in there for you to ask questions. And also I've got some colleagues with me today. So if there's any topic-based questions to what we're going on today, we'll do our best to answer. And if not, we'll be able to send you to the right place to get the information. We've also got the chat function running today. So if you want to say hello and introduce yourself, share any links, please do feel free to do that. So a quick bit about No Limits. So these whole new sets of webinars are all powered by our No Limits platform, which has been going for just over a year now. And I'm just going to spend a few moments to explain what that platform is and how it might help you before we get into the webinar. So we know it's difficult to navigate just the sheer amount of opportunities and advice and training and support that's out there when it comes to thinking about where your innovation is going to go, what your next steps are, or what might you want to do in the future and what your ambitions might be. So what we've done as part of this No Limits work is create a brand new platform which basically brings together a whole host of different partners from across the innovation ecosystem to have a one-stop shop for all of their different offers and opportunities that might be relevant to what you want to do with your innovation. Now, that might be because you're early stage and you're not quite sure where to go. You might be a little bit more developed, say scaling, like we're talking about today, and you want to know what kind of different investment might be available or support how to get that investment, building pitch decks, whatever that might be. We've got a whole host of opportunities and learning opportunities on the platform that go from up and down the country and from all different sectors and sector agnostic stuff as well, in case you just want to find out a little bit more, really. So what I wanted to do, actually, we're really lucky today to have the British Business Bank with us today as a partner on this webinar. I'll introduce you to Michael in a second, who's going to be hosting. But I just wanted to point out a few of the opportunities and advice and stuff they've got on the platform that they've given to us so we can share with you all. So there's bits there about how business finance can work in view, what kind of equity you should be giving up to investors, tips and tricks for attracting spin-out investment. This is just a small sample. There's even more on the platform, and I'll have a QR code for you in a minute to go and find out a little bit more about this. But this is just some of the examples of what the British Business Bank have to offer as a part of their contributions to the platform. Alongside them, here's a couple of other bits that I pulled out that I thought might be relevant for people to go and read about later today. So there's a couple of different investment opportunities there from the Big Issue Invest and BGF, but there's also some support and training opportunities to learn a little bit more about the processes or the things that go into getting that investment in your organization or your innovation. And here's the QR code, the important bit. So please do take a moment to scan this QR code, have a look around the platform whilst you're listening to the webinar today. I will post some links into the chat as we go along so we can see what's going on. You can check it out as you go. But there's over 100 partners on there from all different parts of the country, different sectors, universities, businesses, everything. It's well worth having a look and seeing what might be in there for you and what might be to help you on your journey. And now I've done my intro, I can pass you over to our colleague and our friend from the British Business Bank today, Michael Karim. He is good. I'll let him introduce himself properly and he'll be able to introduce our panel. And I'll do that and pass you on.
Thanks very much, Luke. Hi, my name's Michael Karim. I, as Luke said, work at the British Business Bank. I'm a senior manager in strategy. And if you followed the social media promo for this, you'll know two things about me already. One is apparently I'm a formidable host, which was new to me, but there we are. And the second is that I like to use headshots that are about 10 years old. But never mind. Let's get on to our fantastic panel. We have Thomas Constant, who is a founder at BioBio. Who bring circularity to agriculture, using insects to convert organic waste into fertilizers and animal feed at scale. So we'll be finding out a bit more about what that means. We have Abiel Maar, who's CEO and co-founder of Voila, who are scaling one of Europe's fastest growing clean tech startups transforming food waste into raw materials for biogas and hydrogen production. And we have, last but not least, Emma Fadlan, who's investment projects lead at Innovate UK Business Connect. So she has lots of expertise in startup and early stage company R&D, all aspects of an early stage technology-led company's commercialization pathway, uh, R&D, IPR, contracts, licensing, funding and finance, grants, Series A, B investment. She's a queen of all trades. So lots to get stuck into. So welcome everyone. The first question I wanted to ask you today, we'll go lots into the sort of the scale up journey and how you get finance and how you deal with investors and penetrating those networks. But before we got to that, I wanted to talk about how you got to the starting line. So how did you come to be a person, do you think, that you had the confidence, the ambition, the risk tolerance to plow the path that you have? What factors shaped that? Maybe I'll come to Abiel first.
Hello, everyone. I'm Ariel. So how did I begin my journey is I've started several companies since I was a kid. Not serious ones, but small, tiny businesses. I've always wanted to try something quite random. Eventually, in regards to Huala, it's my research thesis. Back in uni, I did a few years research. I got a fail because apparently I was being told that it doesn't have any enough commercial viability. So I got pretty stubborn and I started the company. That's how I got started.
Thank you. And Thomas?
A little kind of similar. My background was not really based around business. It was more based around innovation, design, kind of that sort of creativity. But then I kind of came up with the initial prototype, which has now spun out into be a buyer, while finishing my industrial design degree at Loughborough University. And then, but I didn't do any business courses previously, so I was like, okay, well, what do I do now? So it was getting my first taste of business was really joining an incubator, where being in that ecosystem and being surrounded by people who were, substantially further ahead than me, and I could learn from them. So that was kind of the real, I guess, the starting point for me. And also being quite naive, because it's quite tough doing. Well, it's very tough creating a business and taking on traditional agriculture sectors that I'm in. So you have to be a little bit naive and optimistic to, I would say, even start it. Otherwise, if you're an expert, you just look at it and say, wow, likelihood is low. There's all these challenges. You know what? No thanks, I'll do something else. So there's a little bit of naivety there and optimism, I would say.
I'll come to you in a second, Emma, but I just wanted to pick up on that piece maybe about the failing at first, right? Would you have got where you've got without that failure? And Thomas, have you had that? Oh, I had a big failure first before, or were you quite lucky first time as you branched out as an entrepreneur? Abiel?
So I've started several businesses. A lot of them fail. Most of them fail.
Okay.
This is by far the one that went a bit further away, further ahead. In terms of failure, yes, the business wouldn't started if I haven't got a fail from a professor. So yes, absolutely.
And Thomas, did you have that critical moment where you did fail hard at something, or as I said, did it happen quite serendipitously for you in contract?
Two big moments, I would say. So the first one was kind of trying to take the initial innovative design, which was created at university, and trying to make a business case for it. So essentially, the initial concept was a kind of a wacky 2050, 2060 idea of essentially growing your own bugs and consuming it. So it was based on trend forecasting, but it wasn't based on commercial viability. So it was essentially turning that and replicating that into more business savvy context. So there was a big pivot from moving from the initial concept to essentially a pet related product that would allow pet owners to grow their animal feed in their own home. And then another pivot after we did that for 2 years, and then realizing that the real scalability wasn't with these small novel household products, but with large scale insect production. So it was an initial pivot from human consumption to animal, then from small scale to large scale. So we moved from these small plastic trays to now a 10,000 square foot R&D facility.
Thank you. And Emma, so you have a life before Innovate, right? And in terms of the investment landscape, so maybe you could tell people a bit about that.
So I came into sort of innovation in a slightly different route. I was a postdoc, 6 years postdocing, always did a lot of clinical sort of product focused work. But at a time when it wasn't fashionable to do spin outs and startups, and there wasn't really a career as it is now, supported in the way it is. And I was headhunted into a startup company, which came out of the university tech transfer. So the way I got my support and training was actually I had amazing mentoring from the CEOs, board members in the organization who basically had to take me along on that whole journey with them, roll up the sleeves. I had to learn about intellectual property, look after the portfolio. We had 12 months funding when I joined, and I was involved in 2 funding rounds. So I ended up doing all the value proposition work, all the background, the evidence, going through that due diligence process with the investors. And that led me onto sort of a commercialization role, which I've had both in sort of public sector and in private sector. So I've done a lot of due diligence and for investors, but also working with companies who are scaling, about looking at the value proposition, where they are in the business, what their growth and opportunities are in order to be able to scale and put forward a really good investment proposition. So I've done that prep work, both due diligence for the investors and then working with private sector organizations and founders to get them ready for.
I can see Thomas and Abel, if they haven't been in touch with you already, probably look like they might be keen to get you advice themselves. So look forward to hearing more about that as we go on, especially, for example, on how to survive due diligence. I suppose I'd be interested about your position in your journey right now, and I suppose this goes more for Abel and Thomas. So often we talk of the first commercialization gap when you're trying to prove your minimum viable product, then your scale up gap where you're trying to get that market traction. So where are you specifically on your journey? What, including in terms of fundraising? Is it about the capital needed to validate your product? Is it to broaden your customer base? Where have you got to? Abiel, if we go to you first. Have we still got Abiel?
Looks like it's frozen. I can
Okay,
speak.
let's go to Thomas.
Yeah, so I guess we're now in the stage where we have validated.
So
Oh.
where are we right now? So we are running
Abiel,
different projects.
Can you hear me? Oh, hi, Abiel. Can you hear me? We had a bit of disruption on your line, so I'm going to go with Thomas for now. Hopefully he comes back. Even Innovate's tech is not bulletproof. So, Thomas, go on.
Yeah, no, sure. So we're essentially in the stage now where we've validated our concept. So we were at the point where we wanted, essentially our assumption was, can we produce cost-effective insect proteins and fertilizers at scale? Because at the end of the day, we're producing these ingredients as a raw material, commodity pricing, pegged against other similar proteins and fertilizers, such as fish meal. So the question is, it's just a price game. Can we produce these at the right price? So we essentially built an R&D facility looking into the viability of insect production. So we built that. We now, with our R&D facilities in Leicestershire, we've validated the economic model. We're now leveraging that to say, look, we've done the R&D. We've proven the business model in a small case. We now need to build a commercial site. And for that, because we're in agriculture, we need CapEx, we need 18 months to 24 months worth of burn rate. So we need an additional employee. So we now need to scale our facility from R&D to commercial, and that requires a significant more amount of money than we've currently raised in the past.
And how capital intensive a business are you amongst the broad spectrum of SMEs raising equity out there? If I do a very reductive spectrum of a very capital like fintech,
so I guess
to a semiconductor business at the other end.
Yeah, so we're definitely closer towards the semiconductor side of things. So we are it's kind of quite an unsexy sector, agriculture, compared to the ones you just mentioned.
It's a subjective thing, Thomas, but go on.
Very subjective, but quite historically unsexy because agriculture is lower margins, slower rollout, smaller multiplier for valuations. So historically, not the sexiest, not where typically the sweet spot is in the UK. That's typically like fintechs. So and you know, again, we're agriculture, so you know, profits margins are smaller because again, we're in the commodity space. So now we're looking at moving from, you know, I guess smaller funds, angel funds, to institutions, you know, larger family offices, agri-tech focused VCs, and it's, you know, it's been quite a journey, especially in this climate when there's a lot of things. You know, I mean, even the past few months, you know, while Trump's in office, it feels a lot
Yeah.
longer.
So if you have that issue with lower margins, and we think of, I don't know, a very conventional investor out there who says, okay, you're not as VC suitable as some other types of business model. How do you mitigate that to them? Do you say, well, actually, my downside is different, or the upside of my IP is substantially greater than this SaaS business that you're looking to invest in?
I mean, basically, exactly right. But I guess obviously the positioning is we don't talk to generalist VCs or
Okay.
VCs that aren't in our sector. So we're mainly talking about agri-tech focused VCs, impact-driven VCs, family offices with an SDG kind of focus, and you know, even a little bit of philanthropy because we are all about essentially insect production is waste management plus livestock. So it's really talking to those investors who have a focus in agriculture and sustainable development goals, because the other ones, they don't care. They'll be like,
Okay.
no, you know what, return horizon's too long for us.
And do you feel that trying to get generalist investors to turn their taps a bit differently is just a fool's errand? It's never going to happen, or do you think over time
For
the
us,
sector
yeah,
can change?
definitely.
Okay.
For us, unless there's more incentive, like, you know, they're like, why? You know, no way. You know, that's not what we do.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. And Abiel, do you want to talk a little bit? Sorry about before. Do you want to talk a little bit about the question was really about where are you specifically on your journey, especially in the context of commercialization gap or scaling, and where you are in your financing journey in particular?
So currently where we are is we have passed the R&D stage. We are currently on my background, I blurred it, but we're building a factory to build
Nice.
our machine. We're running multiple projects right now, like from small to medium size. The latest project that we're at is at Heathrow Airport, Terminal 5.
Okay,
We
nice.
are basically the food waste contractor of Terminal 5. And then in terms of other things,
Decent
like
contract.
we still keep on doing R&D, but still we are at the commercialization stage. In terms of fundraising, last year we closed our first funding round, but we're a very practical team. So we look at, but we want to, we from our perspective, we think that $1 earned from our customer is way more valuable than $1 earned or $1 we got from any investor. So we focus very much on getting the investment, but also at the same time selling and getting actual money in to maintain a better cash flow. So,
Where's the factory?
we're near London Bridge. We're in Bermondsey.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah.
Land cost is quite a lot there, no?
We found a pretty good deal. Covered in
Okay.
mold, but we jet washed the whole thing.
Okay, very nice.
Yes.
Emma, any perspectives on what you've heard so far?
There's a couple of points. I think with Thomas, one of the key points there is about really understanding who your investors are and who you should be talking to. And for me, one of the things I've learned in trying to build investor communities, particularly around agri-tech and food tech, which is one of the hardest areas to do that, particularly when there might be societal resistance as well as sort of regulatory resistance around or challenges to overcome. It's really understanding who are your champions within those stakeholders and who are the investors who are going to be with you for the long run and work with you and introduce you to family offices, which are really, really hard to approach and engage with. And I think it really highlights the challenges a lot of us will encounter with scale up in these areas, which is how do you engage, how do you inform them of what you're doing and what stage you're at, give them the right information at the right time in order to manage the relationship for that scale up investment, because you want that follow on investment. And if they can't follow on, who do they typically co-invest with for that follow on? So I think particularly with Thomas, and I'd really like to explore, how you manage those relationships to build that up, scale up, and maintain those relationships. And
Well,
Nabil, you've got the same challenge. You've got a very operationally quite an expensive capex.
yeah.
Who's investing in the capex
Yeah.
rather than the tech for that scale up for you to be able to really deliver on your plans? Because that again is a different relationship with the type of investors you'd be engaging with.
Well, if I don't ask them, Emma, do prod me too, because I think they're great questions. Just going back about a second on your investor base, Abiel, could you illustrate, was there a period of time where you were bootstrapping and before you even raised external finance, and what type of investor was your very first investor? Because I think you've been through some grant, right?
Yes. So we're not a university spin-out, but we technically comes from a university research. So we got quite a lot of support from the university in the beginning. So the first funding
They didn't, sorry,
that
they didn't take too big a stake. No issues there.
no stick, no
Oh,
IP.
okay. Oh, you're not a spin-out. Sorry. Yeah, go on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that we're they're pretty good. And then
Mm,
eventually we got 2 grants from Innovate UK, and then I think one from a local authority, doing local projects, delivering a local, more like manufacturing, small scale manufacturing in a
mm,
local city. And
mm,
then eventually, I think so kind of that's included in the bootstrap plus some grant funding, for approximately 2-3 years,
mm.
until last year. We're being approached by several investors, and then we decide that it's time to grow. So that's when we got the external investor to be on board, and we started. Yeah.
And for your sector, do you have the same perspective as Thomas about generalist versus specialist investors? Or
Yes.
how do you do? So there's
Yes.
it's ultimately you're only going to be able to appeal to investors who really understand your product.
Yes and no. So we
Okay.
similar to Thomas, we're in a sector which is very unsexy, maybe
Mm.
even more unsexy than what Tom is doing. We're
You're
doing
both very
waste,
sexy. It's fine.
food waste. So that being said, in a way that food waste is everywhere. So it's in my home, it's in your
Yeah.
home, it's in my office, it's in your office,
Yeah.
it's in every single university canteen. So
Yeah.
yes, it's more appealing to more like an industry specific investor, but at the same time, it
Yeah.
also most of the investor actually are quite interested in some unsexy sectors, especially when everyone's
Mm.
cramping into like AI or
Yeah.
cramping into softwares and fintechs. A lot of investors actually looking to more
Mm.
hardcore or hardware based industry. So I guess
Mm.
the whole investor landscape is slightly changing in a way.
Yeah. And can I ask everyone about sort of finding your way into financing networks? So some of the research we've done at British Business Bank has shown, for example, that if you're not doesn't all necessarily apply to you guys, but for example, if you're female, then it can be a lot harder straight away. If you are then female and ethnic minority, it can be even harder to penetrate these male-dominated investor bases. If you're female, ethnic minority, and you live outside London, then your disadvantage is compounded even more often. So it's not always this easily accessible, welcoming world of investing for people to penetrate. Did you find that you had to knock on 100 doors to get where you needed to go, or how painstaking was that process to get the door open? Thomas first.
So comes to the question. So as a white male,
Did you observe your privilege as
I
you were
mean,
going through?
well, first to say, like, there is, I think it's actually pretty discussing some of the data out there that we can see the disparity. I mean, and that is changing. That is definitely changing but it's still nowhere where it should be. So I guess you have to acknowledge that things are getting better, but nowhere near where where it's, I guess, I would say ethically right. and there are funds out there dedicated to the subcategories of focuses. So there's a lot of female funds now that I'm seeing. Just when I check out funds, I see increasingly more amount of them, which is great. But for myself, yeah, I mean, you have to kiss a lot of frogs, right? There's a lot of that. You have to have pretty tough skin. If you were to have the assumption that you can go in and pitch to 5 funds and they're all going to give you an offer and you're going to get all the money in like a couple weeks, it's like, that's delusional. Typically you should be planning for fundraising round to last anywhere between 6 or 8 months. And so that's a lot of conversations. That's do your DD, get your data room built, and then just start pitching. And it's like having thick skin, just knocking on the doors, having emails, coffees, rocking up to networking events, and just getting a lot of no's. Like more people will say no. Your success rate might be 5% or whatever, or lower. And it is just you have to have those conversations, and you have to have some pretty thick skin, because there's a lot of rejection out there, and you can't take it personally.
Maybe
Emma,
as a
I was going to come to you. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, maybe as a female, I can talk a little bit about what I've observed, what I personally experienced when we're doing the fundraising, and also what we're hearing from the female founders. And I think it is a real challenge. But also there's some positive moves. So I think we should balance that out. First of all, I can tell you that usually I was the only female in the room. And if I wasn't the only female in the room, then it was either a lawyer or a patent attorney. So, and that's really improved, hugely improved. It used to be that everybody had to be suited and booted, and if you didn't fit in a certain way and look, then you just didn't get a look in. Whereas now it's a lot more relaxed, there's a lot more diversity. The VC funds are bringing in more women into the community. They're giving them more opportunities, and they're also not falling under the traditional lines of what you look like, having gone to certain universities, certain schools, certain backgrounds. There's more technical innovators coming in, which I think makes a huge difference, because if you've got more people who are from a VC background, in a VC, who've come from a startup or founded a company, both male and female, then you see a much better relationship and profile and discussion going on there. And also means that people can understand your technology, and they're more curiosity driven rather than just looking at the numbers. The other change is we're not seeing everybody who's come from a classic accountancy background. We're getting a few people, maybe more management accountants, who know how to look at finance to run a business. And said that also helps, I think, in the dialogue and the discussion you get. So that's neither gender, some of it is gender related, some of it is kind of early stage founder sort of benefits. When it comes to the experiences that the women have had, there's a lot more the questioning, and the type of questioning women get is very different. If you've got a male co-founder, it'll be directed to the male co-founder. Women have found that when they engage with people through LinkedIn or emails, if they send an email, they don't get a response. But if their male co-founder does, they get a response straight away. So there's a huge amount of unconscious bias. However, there's a lot of work going on both in the south of England and also up in the north, to try and get more female angel investors, more women to invest and become sort of engaged in that early stage investment, to get more understanding about the challenges that women get on that investment, trying to leverage more grant funding to get in. But on the bonus, a lot of the big funds, if you don't have female and diverse co-founders, they won't invest in you, because they say you haven't got the diversity of thinking, you need to have that diversity. And we're seeing that particularly in the corporate venturing and that side of things, where it's actually a requirement for you to have that representation. And we've also got very good evidence that if you give women ask for less money, and they deliver far more and are far more successful than male founders. So the data on our side from investors is like, we are much better bet and a much safer pair of hands to put investment in. So it's changing slowly.
Lots of evidence across financial services related to that. For example, women make better retail investors than men, because they don't tend to overtrade as much, partly. But just one of many data points on that. And actually, the British Business Bank, have published about the number of female-led businesses getting VC, and the numbers are still shocking. We have lots of ideas there, so stay tuned. I would say, on what's to come. Abiel, how about you? Have you faced any barriers in particular? Have you had to kiss a lot of frogs? What's your experience been?
Yeah, it was pretty hard. Uh, it was actually very hard getting the investment. So we uh, we I think when we first started want to raise, we didn't know that it would be that hard. But then what we do is we apply for basically every single competitions, every single grant, every single networking events that we can go, and then we just show up and appear. The first investment, what actually really helps is we make a company clove. So people get it's like easier to be recognized, and then posting every single day on LinkedIn as well. That's how we first get started. Um, I I think I got like at least 2 3 rejections per day when we were raising. But then, funny enough, eventually, when we actually the investor that we went along with, it was not us reaching out to them. It was the only investor that actually reached out to us, and then it became a good fit and became our investor. So you never know, but it was quite a tough journey.
So interested in all your perspectives on when you're making that first step on fundraising. Um, is it how did you even start? Because you could start with a blank sheet of paper and say, "Goodness, I don't even know how to navigate this. I don't know what my first phone call should be. I don't know who the first person to email should be." What was the first step you took? And maybe Emma, you could come in on this especially. I have a feeling there's some provision you might recommend. So what do you think that the very first step, if you feel a bit overwhelmed by this is a world you don't know, and you have got somewhere with your minimum viable product, but you need now you can't bootstrap anymore. You need some kind of investor base.
For me, the first thing is that when the very beginning, when you start developing your product and your value proposition, you should be trying to build those relationships and those networks. You can't have enough friends, and you have to start building your persona and the company's persona quite early on. So I run a pre-seed cybersecurity accelerator program on behalf of DCIT, and what we do is we get people training about how to tell the value proposition, how to tell the story, how to use LinkedIn to engage and start building those relationships, how to go out there and talk to people and build that community of sort of people that can support you along the way, because you need as many people along the way as advice. I always suggest trying to find a mentor, trying to find a personal development mentor around the skills that you need, and finding a mentor who might be a technical or domain space mentor, because they give you two different things. You need one person you can go and talk to and say, I'm trying to do all of these things. I've got to run a business. I've got to get raising. I've got HR issues that I need to deal with. So actually having that sort of friendship support. And then that's where, through those contacts, you find out what is the funding, the support, what's the regional support, how do you engage with your local Innovate UK business growth networks and the other UKRI funded programs. Some of them are delivered through universities, some of them are delivered through the private sector. So you've got a number of incubators, accelerator programs. And that's where you can also learn from peer to peer. And I really encourage peer-to-peer learning as well. And then there's a lot of free resources online. I mean, I've spoken to some entrepreneurs who basically learned so much from YouTube, looked through all the different resources that are available. Whether it's UK, US, I can't begin to tell you how many resources there are. British Library, they run courses online and free. They can show you all the resources you can have in the business library. You've got the International Patent Office, the UK Patent Office that does courses as well. And they can all sort of help you in that proposition and positioning. And if you find a really good investor or angel investor who can sort of help you in that funding and finance, and just use them as that sort of testing your ideas and your business model, Don't get fixed in your business model. You're going to have to change and respond to the market. And I think if we spoke to Thomas and Abiel, you've probably both had some really investors have not invested in you, but are really keen to see you succeed, who've probably given you some really useful and free advice and support, and sort of signposted you through to where those opportunities might be. You just have to build a network and community. It is a contact sport, and it is a numbers game, unfortunately.
Abiel, I'm going to ask you a similar question with one different layer, which is if you could pull out. I saw you smiling and nodding when Em was talking about YouTube. I don't know if that was just me misreading, but if there is one source that you just think, oh, that has actually changed my thinking a bit on this, or it doesn't have to be YouTube. Other broadcasting websites are available. What anything that really switched a light bulb for you in terms of how to do this?
I learned from two sources. One is the Y Combinator YouTube. I watch basically every single video of what they've written. And then I've read a book which is called the Invested Investor. So it's by one of my mentor that sadly passed away recently. But then he was a very experienced angel investor for 30 years, invested in, I think, more than 100 companies. So he had written two books, and the book's basically talking about seeing the investment landscape from both sides. Because he's built five companies that has raised finance, but at the same time being an angel investors, sitting in investment committees. So he talked about how the negotiation process should work, how what is DD, what is an investor committee, what is a deck, what should you write in the deck, all these things, and it really helps.
And Thomas, any source that really moved the dial for you?
I would say not many sources, but I would say being in a community really helped me. Just being in the mix where it happens and understanding that you don't know you don't have all the answers, and it can feel really overwhelming. In the first few months where I started, I felt really paralyzed, and it's just being in an area where personally, for me, it was just really useful being physically in a space that I could almost treat like my office, that was filled with other people doing similar things. Many of them are more advanced than me. So I guess that emotional connection too, because it's very confusing and it can feel quite paralyzing. But at the end of the day, if you take a step back, you have an idea, you need to fund it, and most of us need a fair bit of money up front. But sometimes you can get by with sales or with some grants. So there's multiple ways to kind of skin this cat.
I wanted to ask you a question slightly similar to what Emma said, but with a bit of a difference. And that was about how you use investors for their non-financial input and whether that can actually bring challenges. I mean, I've spoken before to someone who says, we've got 100 contracts and our investor wants to really audit the 97th most important one when the top 10 are the most material, and actually it creates an industry in itself. Now, you might not want to go into loads of detail on that bit, but how do you use your investors for their input and advice, and how do you manage them? Is my question to Thomas first, and then we'll go back through your.
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately you want smart money. You just don't want capital, because you can get capital from different regions. You can get from sales, for example, or grants. So really you want smart money, especially with the angels. Well, angels, if anyone doesn't know what an angel is essentially a person, a private citizen who has made a lot of money and wants to put that back into the startup ecosystem. Basically think of Dragon's Den. So so I would say it's you want the smart money, you want the smart capital. You want access to their little black book of contacts. They are, typically they are at the zenith of their career. They've got loads of industry knowledge. They can open doors. They can make you more credible. They can, I was at a really nice, quite fancy event, and there was this person who I really wanted to speak to, and one of my investors was there, and and he's like, "All right, who do you want to speak to? I'll walk over and intro you." And he just walked over. He said, "Hello, X. Meet Tom." I gave him X money. He's doing some great stuff. Tom, over to you. Those obvious ones, but it's just the smart capital. It be it contacts, be it industry, be it support with finances, IP, whatever. But getting that smart money and making sure at the end of the day, you do a little bit of due diligence on the investors too, because it's not just a one-way street. They're getting a little slice of your pie of your idea, so you need to make sure that they're a right fit. So you need to obviously check them out, see if there's an alignment, because because they'll be with you for many years. So you want to make sure that they align with you personally.
Abiel, how about you? Have you would you echo that about the smart money? I guess sometimes you take what you can get, perhaps. It's not always plentiful out there, but what have you been able to extract non-financially from people who've invested?
Actually, we're very picky in terms of who our
Okay.
angel investors are. We even for our investor, we negotiated with them for 9 months. So we put ourselves in a position that we got enough grant funding to really negotiate, because we're in the long game with them for quite a long time. But then for investors, after carefully selected, they represent 4 industries that we want to target. Each of them are either a customer or either a potential customer, or a champion for a potential customer. So they are essentially, we call them a sales champion, which helps to sell in their own sector. Part of the angel investors or investors, they have access to events, just like Thomas said, that I cannot access to. They have networks that they know people that I don't know. But if they were to sell what we're doing to the people that they know personally, it's way more. It's better coming from me. So that's essentially how we work with them.
So we're starting to run out of time, so I'm going to ask you different questions, not all the same one. Emma, I wonder if we could major on the due diligence and how to survive it, how to strive when people do want to do DD on your company.
I have to say, when I was in the startup company, that's the bit I enjoyed the most, because I was subject to 2 due diligences. We had, we had international due diligence. We had international investors and due diligence, so they got a third party in. And then as a member of an angel club, we don't do due diligence because we're not FCA regulated, but I do the follow-up questions, and I manage that sort of follow-up to help bring the angel investors on board. So there's 2 different processes, whether it's a VC, which is a formal one, or an angel, which is a more informal, because most angel networks aren't FCA regulated. So the information they're looking at is slightly different, and also what you're looking at in early stage and later stage is different. So if you scale up, it's going to be looking at the team, your ability to execute, the finances, and what is your traction, your commercialization route to market. And of course, it's going to be different if you're a digital software. I've seen some of you are cyber versus if you're healthcare or an engineering, which is a very long time frame. But they'll be looking more on that side of things. If you're early stage, they're going to be looking at your value proposition and the team and your culture values about how you can sort of move things around, sort of deal with what you're doing, and be able to move and respond to the marketplace with the value proposition and your approach. So they're looking for different things on that level. But the actual paperwork they're looking for, you need to understand how to run a business. So you as an individual, you need to have your HR, all your legals, health and safety, which I'm sure, regulatory, which I'm sure both Thomas and Nabil have had quite a lot of a learning curve around that. They're going to want to see your employment contracts, your good leaver, bad leaver, your co-founder contracts. Most early stage businesses fail because of the co-founders falling out, not because of money, but about a difference in view of direction. They're going to want to see your research and understand how robust it is, your lab books, your patents, and your IP strategy. Understand your IP strategy. And it's not, the patents may or may not be successful. It's really hard. You only get most people don't understand. You only get certain claims within a patent sort of given to you. So it's how strong are those claims that you can actually have given to you in your, when you're successful in the patent, and how have you ring-fenced your technology, or how have you protected yourself with database rights, copyrights, those kind of things. So to show that you understand this and that you've got a strategy is really important. And then when you're scaling up, that it's actually secure and you're not at risk of being, sort of challenged by anybody. Or if you are at the risk of being challenged, you know how you're going to address those challenges. That's what they're looking for. Then,
Thank you.
yeah, so and then you've got the finances. Have you asked for reasonable amounts? If you've got prototypes and you've only budgeted for one prototype and you actually need one on the side in case one breaks down, one working and one sort of being tested in another site, and you've only
Mm,
3 prototypes, then the numbers, the money doesn't stack up. So they're looking for a really realistic kind of prediction. You should know your monthly burn rates. You should know operationally what you need. You should know for R&D what you're going to have there. And just for everybody, grants are nice to have. They're not need to have. So particularly when you're coming for scale up investment, investors will not look at grants as being something particularly valuable to them. Yes, it helps, it de-risks, but it's more a case of, if you don't get the grant, and is the grant distracting you from actually delivering on that growth in scale up?
thank you. Abil, I wanted to ask you about your touch points with the public sector in general. So um, whether that's somewhat precluded, if BBB has ever been on your horizon, or indeed Innovate UK, is there anything, or even if it's not directly for your company, but your observations on the market, is there anything the public sector could be doing better to support young entrepreneurs?
Um, from my perspective, I think it's very hard for the public sector to change, but rather the entrepreneur would be better to look in how to be compatible with it. So I think that if you can build a business that goes along with the regulatory environment or how the public sector works in general, yes, they change quite a bit, but then, I mean, it takes time to change. So if you can build a business that grows with a specific law or a specific regulatory maybe environment in general, and it would really help and benefits.
Thank you. And Thomas, in terms of lessons learned and what you'd do differently if you had your time again in your journey so far, is there anything that stands out?
I'd say learn faster, fail faster,
Mm,
and importantly, ask for more money.
okay.
We've done a few kind of like pre-seed rounds, and you can burn through money faster than you expect. So, I'd say, move faster try and solve things quicker and ask for more.
Thank you. Luke, shall we move to Q&A?
Yes, I should hopefully pop up on screen in a moment.
Mm,
Thank you. Just firstly, big thank you to all of the panel and the host Michael today for these questions, these comments. They've been fantastic. We've got about 10 minutes. I will do my best to get through these questions, but I can't promise to answer all of them. But hopefully we'll pick out some big ones. I did see one in there which I want to address. It's not really something that the panel can answer, but it was about understanding a lot of the terminology that we're using today and how it can be quite confusing for people if they haven't really been in the sector long. And do we have anything on the No Limits platform to support that? I've actually ran this back up to the No Limits team. We're going to look into how we can maybe support with some of this like jargon busting bit. So we'll definitely
Investopedia, Luke. There's if you Google Investopedia, there's a really good resource which has got a lot of terminology. Also, some of the crowdfunding platforms have done some really good resources. I can work with you to put some of those links in because I have them already in the resources I share out there. And so do engage with the free resources that are available through the various government platforms. You'll be surprised. British Business Bank's got a absolutely fantastic resource for startups, for scale-ups, and for patient capital. If you go, they've got the different offers they've got on there. They've got really, really worked hard to make that useful. It's there's a lot out there. You just have to sort of look.
Yeah, I'll try. What I'll do when we send out our follow-up email after this webinar today, I'll throw some links into that. So there's some bits for people to start looking at, but we'll aim to try and get something up on the platform at some point, which maybe breaks down some of these terminologies for people. So let's have the big question, actually, the one that's been asked a few times that I saw was finding people to join you. So how is it that you've gone around finding those people? The example given here is are there boiler rooms of people to find, but where is it that you go when you're looking for that co-founder or that investor that you're looking for?
Well, those are two different things, really.
Let's start with investor, because that's probably the main part about this. Thomas, you came off mute there.
Yeah, sure. So I guess it depends who you're looking for. If you're talking investors, institutions are pretty easy to find. VC, I even made a VC list of funds. I think I shared it on the chat. Well, there's over 1,400 funds on there. They're pretty easy to find. They're just out there. They share themselves. However, finding family offices and finding angel investors, and angel investors are typically the ones who you bring on first, because they put in, per angel, £5,000, maybe £50,000, or maybe more. But they're essentially rich private citizens. So how do you find these people? They don't exist. There's not a database where you can search these people. But that's a really key aspect of that is just getting in the mix, going to events, using your network, literally whatever sector you're in. Just if you're in London, of course, London, Manchester, wherever your big city is, I would just say really advocate just going into those meetups, physically meet those people. And then LinkedIn. I mean, LinkedIn was my biggest friend. I did my first investment raise during COVID. I couldn't meet people. So what did I do? I just went to LinkedIn, typed in angel investor into the search bar, region, London, connection, second connection, then just cold messages. Hundreds and hundreds of times. And most people don't reply, and even when they do connect, they won't message you back. So there's those sorts of things to do. I would say I would treat. And I have treated LinkedIn as almost like an open diary for me, and it's paid huge dividends of just people reaching out and connecting. So, yeah, it's quite, but otherwise it's quite tough. That's why you need to, your network really in the early stages, really your net worth. Even though I kind of hate that phrase.
You've also got platforms like ShipShape VC, which are free to use. You've got Bowhurst, which is a paid for, but some of you may have access to that as a database. There are lots. If you Google what you're looking for, and you have a good search, you'll find lots of free kind of aggregated platforms with lists of investors. There's so many different people who've done them. Some old ones, people like Tech UK have pulled things together, which are available as free resources. We've also got the investor partnerships, which are about 170 odd investors that have gone through a due diligence. You've got the investor partners who British Business Bank have put funding in. So British Business Bank acts like it's what's called a limited partner. So they put money into funds as the cornerstone investor, and then they have thematic ones which are regional. They have thematic funds or regional funds as well. So those are also good investors because they have other funds. They don't just sort of distribute the funds through the through the British Business Bank funding. They'll have other investors. So it's and also for quite a few of you, looking just to the UK-based investors may not be the only route. You should be looking at the European investors. They will invest into the UK. And if Europe is your bigger market for what you're doing, because there's a greater appetite for it, there's a quicker driver, lower regulatory frameworks. Europe and the US might be a good source of investors. So you do have to kind of look at what the trends are in your sector, and also look at people who are like you, maybe a couple of rounds ahead of you, and look at who's funded them in the past. On Companies House, you can see the list of who the investors are on the cap table. So that's the capital table that gives you the list of who owns the company and what percentage. That tells you who's invested. If it's a family office, you sort of a bit hard. You'll see angel investors or angel clubs will be maybe under a nominee account, but you'll see the VCs as well. So you can do a little bit of that hunting around. I think the hardest thing as a founder and as an innovator is finding the time to do all of this. So you need to carve out some time in your day-to-day life where that becomes a priority work for you to do that. And to put that time and effort in to look for investors and engage with them. And I think that's one of the hardest things to do, isn't it? I'm sure Abiel and Thomas can say how many probably nights they've spent doing that work on top of their day-to-day job.
Yeah, I hear that a lot from our alumni, one of our awards, that's the time suck, is getting those networks in. But once you're in, it's exponential. Like Thomas and Abiel have both said, you get one person, they introduce you to another, and suddenly you've got a massive network of people that you didn't have before. I like to promote all of our awardees, and Thomas and ABO have both been through programs that I've looked after. But I'm going to specifically mention Thomas because he's done a couple of really great LinkedIn articles on funding. He's posted a few in the chat today. It's well worth having a look because there's some really great nuggets of information that he's put together out there publicly for people to have a look at, related to a lot of these things. Next question. So here's an interesting one. We were talking earlier about the disparity in how funding and investment is issued across the ecosystem, whether that be gender or a host of other demographics. The question here is any workarounds that inspired confidence in investors if you don't walk, talk, or act like them? So, for example, different educational or maybe socioeconomic backgrounds or whatever that might be. Do you have any kind of insight in how that works when you're kind of coming at it from a very different life experience to someone who's maybe not going to fully relate to your journey, but how do you support getting that message across?
I can go quickly. I would say, well, with the first group of investors, angel investors, it's their own money. They're doing it on an emotional basis. They're not a rational fund who have criteria to hit. They're doing it. It's their own capital. They make the decisions. Essentially, if they like you and believe in you, because they know the ideas change. They know that the vast majority of their portfolio will fail. That's how it works. The 80-20 rule. But it's done on an emotional decision. So do they like you? Do they resonate with the idea? Do they want to see you thrive? So it's really down to kind of emotional connection you have with them. And if you're and those differences might apply, they might not, depending on the investor. So it's I guess it could just be just being really likable and really believing in your concept and selling it. Being a great salesperson in that regard.
Yeah.
Anyone else want to come in on that?
Yeah. Angel investors, they are good follow-on investors, and they're also will be willing to support and work with you quite often. So, and they're also probably quite well connected, either in the sector that you're looking at or into other investor and angel networks. So actually finding who your regional angel investor network is, or if there's a particular angel network that is sort of thematic for you, is a really good start to try and build that relationships and start building it up quite early on and try and get some of that advice. I'm still a member of an angel club, and they cross-refer across the region. So they've got a fee sharing sort of approach as well, so that they're not taking the money out of the company and the fundraise, like some networks can work. So it's a very good resource, and they actually put more money into the UK investment than VCs combined, just to give you sort of a sense of how much money is there. And there's a lot of female founder and diversity-led angel investor networks that are coming out now. So it's absolutely worth sort of understanding how they work and how invest. Some of them will be quite high risk, and some of them will be much more risk averse, but the majority of them are follow-on investors as well. So they might come in for 2 or 3 rounds with you, and they can help you negotiate with VCs.
Yeah, that's always handy, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm going to squeak in one more question because we're out of time, but if it's okay, I'll squeak in one last one, which hopefully won't be too mega of an answer. But there's one question here which is interesting, which I think is, how long did it take between starting your first contact with your investor to getting the money in the bank? Obviously, it's different for different people, but I think it might be interesting for the audience just to have some kind of idea of how long that process took from, so not grant funding, but your first, I'm going to get an angel or a VC or whoever involved to that money landing. How long did that take roughly?
I can go. For me, the shortest time period is 1 year. The longest time period is more than 2 years. That is actually part of my advice as well. So angel investors are still humans. They like friends. If you just like your friend, you wouldn't want to talk to them every single day, every time you see them, about money, asking them for money. But for us, what we do is, yes, we do want them to invest. We think it's a good fit, but we want them to see our journey instead. So we invite them to come along to product launch, sometimes just for a chat, sometimes just for a coffee, sometimes to see what kind of mistakes, what kind of hardship that we're at, what we're stuck, and simply ask for advice, like genuine advice. There was one time I remember that I was being stuck with some random like building a prototype, and we just asked one of the investor, now became an investor, to come in and help us to fix the problem together. So it was pretty random, but then they actually like how genuine we are. We try not to hide away stuff, and then we really want to tell them that after getting your money, if you do invest, we do not only want your money, but we want your help, and we need your help. So I think that's a long way to go. It's not like you're going to meet someone and then you're going to take their angel investment monies like 2 weeks afterwards. Sometimes it takes a short period of time, but for us, from our experience, take quite a long time. And it doesn't really matter in a way, because if they really do invest and if your company do really survive, they're going to be stuck with you for quite a long time anyways. So yeah.
And something I'll just add to that I find really useful, especially in the early days, when you have your deck and when you think you're kind of ready to start talking to investors. What I found really quite useful was, the people I did have in my network basically say, hey, like, I think we're ready. I'd like to pitch to you, like a practice pitch, and I would like you to tear it apart, give me your thoughts. So there's a little bit of ego rubbing there, and there's also a lot of good feedback you get. So, I would say you can have early talks with investors under the guise of, look, I want your advice, and they get a little bit of an ego boost. You get advice, and then you also get to build upon that relationship. So I would say tap into even the ones you do know early on. Try and use them as a resource, because obviously don't abuse it, but use it where appropriate.
I would add to that from my experience, or how we engage with the investors, and with the angel side of things, is have a data room where you're putting updates of what's going on that investors have access to. So rather than having to email everybody, particularly if you've got loads of angels on a busy cap table, is have a room where you put in everything that's happening, anything that's significant that's going on, put your monthly updates into there about what's happening, do key points, highlights on technical milestones, R&D milestones, any new hires or anything that's happening. And keep that communication and keep that up to date, because what's going to give investors confidence in you is that if they see that you're sharing and you're open and you're transparent, they're going to feel a lot more confident about what you're doing and engage with you. They're also going to feel that the way you work and the way you approach, you're organized, you are on top of everything. And they're going to have more confidence in you in that leadership role as well. Because one of the big things, I mean, we're talking here about this sort of scale up side of things. The big confidence they've got to have in you is that you've got the skills and the capability to scale that business, that you understand how to communicate with stakeholders, with customers, with other investors as you're scaling up. And the more you can start demonstrating and showing those skills and those values, the more likely they're going to invest in you, because they're investing in you to be able to deliver on that business. And one of the stories we hear very often in the companies in the UK is that you get to that scale up, that Series A, that second Series A fund, and they'll bring in somebody above you as a CEO. And move, the founders out into a different role or completely out of the business. And part of the reason is because a VC is thinking about their investment, not about you. An angel was looking at you and the business. A VC is looking at the business, not you as the lead of the business. And I think the more you can do to show that you are the person to lead and grow that company, and the better relationship you can have from the very beginning, the stronger position you are to have that confidence that you're investable as a leader. And it is about you. So take time to get yourself trained up and skilled and invest in yourself. Don't forget, you're as important to invest in as the business.
Definitely. Thank you. Michael, did you have any comments at the end there?
Just thank you. Real pleasure to learn from people who've been at the coalface, and I enjoyed the conversation. I hope it was useful. I've put in the chat some information about a handbook to programs that the British Business Bank run. You should certainly look out for more coming in from our direction over the next few weeks, as we've just been through a spending review, and there's more to come. Thank you.
Thank you. And it's for me to say a massive thank you to Michael, Thomas, Emma, and Abby for coming along today. It's been a really interesting conversation. The chat is full of people being very happy and very thankful for the conversation and the comments today. There'll be a follow-up email to everyone who's come on along today to watch. And what I'll do is I'll do my best to draw some of the links out that we've spoken about wherever some resources can be given, and we'll make sure they get out to you so you can have a look. You'll also get a feedback link as a part of our mail out after this. It'd be great if you could let us know what you thought. This is a fairly new initiative for us, these webinars. We'd love to hear what you, the ecosystem, the community, the audience think of these things and what you might want to learn about. So please do, if you don't mind, take a few minutes just to have a look at those. And with that, I'll say thank you to our fantastic panel again, and I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their day. Have a great day.